Welcome to Fireside Chats with Mats. So, one thing I've been thinking about recently, and I think I may have mentioned it in some kind of audio thing recently, but I don't know if it would have been one of these. But it's the idea of doing stuff that very few people are doing. The thing is, these days, there's a great Tony Robbins quote. He says, he's he's talking about sort of going against the tide or whatever, and he says if everyone in society is running one way, I'm going the other way, and especially today, I don't think there's ever been a time in my life when it's been more a case of you do not want to be doing what everyone else is doing. And so, what are some good things? What are some seemingly positive things that not a lot of people seem to be doing these days? Well, how about reading books? Fewer and fewer people are reading books, and it seems like things are getting worse and worse, so you could sort of put those together and extract some kind of meaning of that, or extract some kind of significance to that, being that, if you actually do read more books, you will be not only going away from the wrong direction and towards the right direction, but you'll be significantly going in the right direction. And you'll have like a huge advantage over most other people. And it's not about so much, I mean, it's sort of fun, like having an advantage over others, and like it's sort of video gamey, but it's not so much about having an advantage over others as it is like truly looking for like the best way to go and the most advantageous way to live in general and the best thing you can do. And um and it's just like everything's pointing towards reading being really positive, because it seems positive anyway, especially, you know, just try it. Like, try reading for a little while, and you'll probably come away feeling like really pretty great. Like, pretty rejuvenated, even if it probably would take a decent amount of effort, but in some sense, you'll probably feel pretty electrified, really integrated, like all your systems are online. If you're really got into your reading, whatever it may be. But like specifically, and it doesn't have to be like pieces of paper, although those are nice, but just like, although, trees and whatever, but, and I don't want to minimize that, but specifically specifically like reading, like, even if it's, you could read something online, you could even read like a freaking article online or something, but specifically something where what you're doing is reading words, like you're reading printed words in some kind of like, I mean, you don't have to read like a huge amount to like feel the benefits and whatever, but like in some kind of like semi-extensive way, like not just like one text. I guess you could just keep reading a text over and over again or whatever, but like not like just one text message or like a short email or something, but like, sit down and read, like, you may not get through more than like 2 or 3 pages, and that may be good reading, but something, or even like a page long poem or something. Poems tend to have a lot more compressed, or that might be the idea. But it's like, just just doing that. Or like what else? A lot of things like truly self-empowerment and true excellence, like a lot of stuff like that is very much looked down upon these days, as sort of a cliche to talk about, but like sort of a right-wing kind of talking point cliche or something. But it's true. Like it is sort of like a Harrison Bergeron society, and any way you stick your head above the crowd, people are just going to resist it, even if it's simply, and this is often the case with this, even if it's just thinking for yourself about a certain thing that you're told. Like simply coming to your own conclusion about something, even if it's not a conclusion about the veracity of something, but just a conclusion about what you think about it that isn't a conclusion that you've sort of been provided with by some like mainstream tastemaker, essentially. um like, oh, I like, for example, like the gay stuff, like, oh, I this may seem sort of self-serving because this is the conclusion I've come to it, but it's like, the conclusion I've come to it is that it's actually aberrant. Like it's actually psychological distortion, or like, and well, sort of confu- mistakenness, let's say, or delusion, to put it in a term that might be a little more confrontational, mixed with like emotional baggage, and like, essentially like it's an attachment thing, like anything else, I would say. And so, but the thing is, like, it's not like I don't believe that anyone in the world is gay. Like I literally give name me any, like, your gayest person in the world, and it's like, no, I don't believe for a second that they're gay. Someone may have a more maybe masculine or feminine personality in some sense, but I don't, biologically, sexuality is for reproduction, and anything that's not reproductive sexually, anything that's not being done as it is meant to be sexually and biologically is aberrant. Just like eating in a way that's not as it's meant to be is aberrant. Like, eating and then throwing up your food. I've given that example elsewhere. That's aberrant behavior. Eating, you like swallow food and then you digest it and then you poop it out and you get the nutrition. Like that's eating working properly. And sex, not to put those two things together, but like sex is, a intercourse and then ejaculation and then, maybe fertilization of the egg, and then if the egg is fertilized, then, the growing of the growing of the person. And it's really it's very simple, but things are so distorted, and our desires can be so distorted. Even just somebody looking at pornography throughout their life and then going to more and more hardcore and, like, aberrant forms of pornography throughout their life, even if it's just aberrant in terms of being more like, S&M type stuff, or like rough sex kind of stuff, like sort of sadistic kind of stuff. Any of that, it's like clearly there's some kind of emotional baggage going into it, and often enough people will progress to like more and more extreme forms of pornography throughout their life. And it's like that's an example right in itself. You weren't sexually aberrant in that way, at least to the same degree, or at least it wasn't manifesting in that way, at the beginning of your watching porn. But then over time, you ended up looking for and desiring different things. And it's like, that kind of stuff, it's hitting us all over the place in our society. All sorts of negative conditioning and all sorts of shit. And it's like, but the thing is, so I would, come back from all that and say, I don't believe homosexuality is a natural thing. Like I believe I would place it in the same category as any other, like, emotional or psychological complex or whatever. And I'm no fan of psychiatry or anything either, and I would have maybe different explanations about how those things operate and what they are, but like just in terms of like sort of psychological complexes and stuff, based on attachment and emotional baggage and trauma. um, and one thing I would point out, not to get into the topic too much, just not to veer away, but one thing I would point out is that there's this perception in this presentation that emotional trauma and so-called mental illness and psychological complex and stuff like that, baggage, it's all, people like from AA all the way to psychiatry. The idea that's presented, usually implicitly, usually not explicitly, but sometimes it is explicit, in certain ways. The idea that's presented is that if you have one of these issues, you're never going to get better. It's never going to go away. It's always going to basically be the same. So like with AA, you're always going to be an alcoholic, or with psychiatry, you're just we're not giving you a solution. We're just giving you a band-aid and saying, this is just medication that you're going to continue to take. And it's like, well, you know, that's a very disempowering thing. And I would just say to you, I'd challenge you, if you feel like, or if you've been told that you have any of these complexes or whatever, who knows? You probably do have some psychological trauma that you're carrying around, just perhaps simply by virtue of growing up in this culture and having nothing else go particularly wrong. And, what a fucking, what a terrible, terrible set of influences. But at the same time, it's like, I challenge you to look into the Sedona method, or try to complete the book, The Presence Process. That book and the Sedona method, those were huge for me. Or even just read The Power of Now. I'd say any of those three. All of those were huge. Maybe those were like the three hugest things for me. The Sedona method being more like a connector and just sort of like a presentation polishing of like some stuff essentially from, that you could relate to the Eckhart Tolle stuff or the presence process stuff. But, just start letting go emotionally and start letting go of your attachments and baggage and desires and stuff. And I think you'll find that many things might change in your experience, and you may feel totally differently. And you may find that sort of letting go of attachments and sort of like whatever, you may find over time that everything changes for you. And, maybe some things get more tumultuous because you're actually encountering some feelings that are, then you're still not going to be particularly interested in, coming into contact with. But at the same time, it's like, this is actually the road to, this is actually like showing, it's not even about a road to anything. It's just like, this stuff is not permanent. And similar to that, I would say, like having some idea that you're gay or something, like that doesn't have to be a lifelong thing. Like, because I would submit that it's invalid to begin with.